Good evening, welcome back, and thank you for your patience to the November 22nd, 2022 Finance and Operations Committee in-person and virtual meeting. The meeting of the Finance and Operations Committee will please come to order. I'd like to note that Director Mitchell is no longer here, and Director Williams is here. The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda?
So moved.
Are there any amendments to offer?
There are no amendments to offer.
Thank you. The agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please signify by saying aye opposed and state your name for the record. Those abstaining, please signify by saying aye abstain and state your name for the record. The motion carries. I will now turn over the Finance and Operations Committee meeting to my co-chair, Director Warsavage.
Thank you very much, President Brown. Mr. Rogers, would you mind beginning with an overview of your agenda items for this evening and launching right into number one, please?
Sure. Tonight we have two agenda items. First is a short-term planning regarding Aronimink and the Senkow Elementary Schools, which will require board action. District Administration will discuss our short-term plans for the Aronimink and Senkow Elementary Schools. The presentation will review planning goals, space considerations, catchment areas, long-term planning, and short-term planning. In addition, the administration will provide the board with their recommendation for the short-term planning. The second agenda item is the 2023-24 budget presentation regarding the preliminary budget versus the accelerated opt-out, and this is also board action. We will discuss the Act 1 timeline as it relates to both a preliminary budget and an accelerated opt-out resolution. We'll review historic data as it relates to the Act 1 index, and based on the information provided, we'll ask the board to move forward with one of the following: either an opt-out resolution or a resolution authorizing the proposed preliminary budget, display, and advertising, or an accelerated budget opt-out resolution. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Dr. Manfrey to present on the short-term planning for Aronimink and Senkow.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Good evening, members of the board, Upper Darby School District community, Dr. McGarry, administration. What an exciting time to be an administrator or a teacher or anyone working in Upper Darby School District, a long time coming, to bring our Senkow Elementary School, Walter M. Senkow Elementary School students back home within the bounds of Upper Darby School District. That's what I'm here to speak to you about this evening, to finally, after 20-some years, bringing that community back home. So tonight we're going to be reviewing planning goals, space considerations, changes in catchment areas which will require board action at the December board meeting, specifically an attachment within Policy 206. Kind of a unique aspect of Policy 206 is that there's an attachment with the names of all the streets of houses that attend Upper Darby School District that will need some changing. Reminder of some long-term planning goals, and then, of course, short-term, what will this look like? And so I'm going to get right into it with some short-term planning goals. First, this is a reminder back when we embarked on our first facility study way back in, I believe, 2015. The number one goal has always been to bring Walter M. Senkow students back within the bounds of Upper Darby School District. That the transportation from that community to Senkow and back again is such that it is not as conducive for parent engagement, and something that we feel and always have felt very strongly about, bringing the Walter Senkow students back to Upper Darby School District. And so it's taken a while to get there, but with the addition of Aronimink Elementary School, we are going to be able to bring the Senkow Elementary School students back to Upper Darby, but that will require a revision to the catchment area attachment to Policy 206. And so those are the short-term goals that I want you to think about this evening as I go through this presentation. Long-term goals, which was the presentation that we did last month, just as a reminder, is that this is a temporary measure to have Walter M. Senkow students combined with Aronimink Elementary School. Of course, when we get the site logic complete facility study that's being led by Mr. Lambert and his team, we'll be able to determine where and if we'll be able to build a new elementary school in the eastern part of the school district, and then redesign the catchment areas for one last time. There were some options to be considered as we were planning for moving our Senkow students back to the school district and into Aronimink Elementary School. And the first option that we considered as administration was to add Senkow students plus a couple of small catchment areas from Hillcrest. This would enable us to immediately alleviate some of the overcrowding that is occurring at Highland Park. However, it would increase transportation costs, and as the board and the community is well aware, the biggest concern with increased transportation costs and increasing the demand on our transportation department at this time is staffing and finding drivers and transportation workers. We came to the conclusion that the drawbacks to this option outweighed the positives, and we are not recommending this as an option to consider. Option 2 that the administration considered was to make Aronimink Elementary School a grade 1 to 5 school with Senkow students. This would not increase costs to the school district as far as transportation is concerned. But one of the drawbacks is that we would not really be using the full facility that we're creating at Aronimink Elementary School, the beautiful new facility that would be left in certain aspects with areas that aren't being used. And so we believe that the negative of that outweighed the positive of no increased transportation costs. And so this is an option that is not being recommended. Finally, the third option, and the option that the school district administration is recommending to the board, is to allow Aronimink Elementary School to become a K-5 school that will include the Walter M. Senkow Elementary School students. The positives, huge positives, is that by creating a kindergarten through 5 building, we're maximizing the space of a newly renovated Aronimink Elementary School and its addition. And we would be alleviating overcrowding at the K Center and providing additional classroom space for supports and services at the K Center. As Dr. McGarry has been reporting to the board and to the community, that when we do his superintendent's coffees with the staff, it was very eye-opening to us that the needs of the K Center are great, and that providing that additional space will provide us opportunities to give those students additional services. One of the drawbacks, and a big drawback, and hopefully not for a long period of time, is that this does not alleviate the overcrowding at Highland Park Elementary School, although it seems that the population of Highland Park Elementary School has decreased this year, and it appears could be stagnant, according to Mr. Lambert's work, his ability to see into the future, could be stagnant in the coming years. So we're down probably 75 students at Highland Park Elementary School in terms of the numbers, so that we didn't see that as a negative that was not something we could overcome. I included some of the maps that Mr. Lambert included in the last presentation that we did for the board, and I thought it would be important, the team thought it would be important, to remind the community and the board of the current catchment areas. As you can see here, Senkow over on the eastern part of the school district is in yellow. There's a small portion of Senkow that is in between Garriford Elementary School and Bywood Elementary School that will be going to Aronimink, and I will show you the new proposed catchment areas. This representation is of the number of students. As you can see, where I was in the previous map, Senkow to the far right and in between Garriford and Bywood, there is a large number of students in that catchment area that covers Senkow Elementary School to the far right. A smaller number in the area that I like to call, when I grew up, it was called Drexel Plaza. The Drexel Plaza area behind the YMCA and that Garrett Road area, a smaller number of Senkow students live there. But in all, it's very close to the same exact number of students at Aronimink and Senkow. So essentially, we would be doubling the size of Aronimink Elementary School. This is the proposed new catchment areas. As you can see, Aronimink is the bright yellow on the far western side of the school district, and now the former Senkow catchment areas are bright yellow, creating our new renovated and addition to Aronimink Elementary School K-5 for our proposal from the administration. Short-term planning. We have two options for the lease at Walter M. Senkow Elementary School as the administration sees it. First, allow the lease to expire at the end of this school year, putting our faith in that the August 2023 deadline will be met with our general contractors and our primes, our construction. Or continue the lease from the Archdiocese until winter break of 2023 and to make the transition in January. Make the transition from the current Senkow Elementary School to Aronimink in January. This would require a board action. Either one of those will require board action to temporarily redefine the Aronimink Elementary School catchment area to include Senkow Elementary School and include the kindergarten students from Senkow and Aronimink to make Aronimink Elementary School K-5. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation and ask the board and the community for questions.
Dr. Manfrey, I appreciate it. Just as a reminder to the board as well and to the public, we've shared this. Senkow, while it's a leased facility, and it was meant to be temporary 20-something years ago, whatever action the board takes to move Senkow away, whether it was to build a new school in 69th Street area, as you see, as Dr. Manfrey provided, the students come from different areas. Senkow was not going to go into its own neighborhood school ever. The students were always going to go back to the neighborhoods where they live. Redistricting was going to occur, which would have required us to sunset Senkow Elementary School. I've talked to Board Member Warsavage, who's active on the Home and School, and we are working and will be sharing, depending on what the board decides to do, either long-term or short-term, things like creating pen pals between Aronimink and Senkow Elementary School if the board approves, hosting a barbecue with parents and students to get together at Aronimink before the school year lets out. So transitional conversations to build those relationships prior to the end of the school year, moving into next school year, if the board moves in this direction. If the board does not, just keep in mind that at some point in time, Senkow, for all intents and purposes, will sunset as a school to go back to what we're still working toward, which is we are trying to build a school somewhere in the Biowood, Stonehurst area, as Dr. Manfrey provided, where all the students are. Right now, as we presented a month or two ago, it's complicated to build a school in that area. So this is a short term, hopefully to get to the long term. Any action by the board taking our recommendation tonight at the December meeting would be a resolution to begin a process to hold a public hearing to decide whether or not you're going to allow Senkow to sunset as a school, and that will require a public conversation. We don't want to use other terminology to scare children right now to think we're going to stop something from functioning right now. This will be building into next school year. That will be the game plan. I just want to make sure you're aware of that process as well.
Dr. McGarry, I just want to make sure I'm clear in the process and where we landed, because I know originally when we was looking at moving Senkow, was maybe we was considering to the K Center, right, and moving the K Center students to Aronimink. So, and I know you constantly look at this to make sure we're maximizing our facilities and doing what's best for the entire district, all things considered. So, just walk me through, or just give me a 10-second summary on that was the plan, and now we're here where we're going to merge. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and President Brown, I appreciate that. I think we were all hopeful and optimistic that, as Dr. Manfrey said, this started in 2015, 2014. You were a parent on the Ed Specs committee at that time with me. And we all thought that it was going to move faster. We were excited. Little did we know it would take 28 to 30 meetings just to get Aronimink with an addition and the stuff that we're dealing with in Clifton Heights. So we were optimistic that the kindergarten would move over to Aronimink quickly, and we could build a new elementary school, and then it would all redistrict one time. The reality is building a new elementary school quickly has not happened. So in meeting with our administrators here in the district and the team, and hearing the newer concerns of the kindergarten center, why move the kindergarten to move the kindergarten back again and make that move. Now, we kicked around the idea that the kindergarten center is technically a one-year transition anyway. One of our original goals that David Neal, board member Neal, keeps on reminding me of is, why can't we have K-5 schools? Why can't we have K-5 schools? We'd like to have K-5 schools, which is one of our original goals. We just don't have the space. So it's more complicated here all the time we turn around to find a space and to make this happen. So it's not a 10-second answer, I apologize, but
okay.
it's temporary because we can't get to K-5 schools right now, and to move kindergarten, to only move kindergarten back, and meeting with our team, they felt this would be a better use of the facility and to give students who are traveling outside the community a newer place to work with grass and fields, and to give those Senkow students this opportunity. We feel like it would be a good idea to immerse them that way and then still work toward a goal of getting students back into their actual neighborhood that way. That was the thought process.
Thank you, Dr. McGarry. Thanks for walking me through that, and Dr. Manfrey.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll only add that we've come to the realization, and Dr. McGarry can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're now always going to need the K Center. At one point in time, it was our hope and dream that we would be able to sunset the K Center. We realize now, with Dr. McGarry clearly pointed out, without the ability to create K-5 buildings, because there's just no room, we're always going to need the K Center. And so, to Dr. McGarry's point, why move the K Center twice? Wouldn't make any sense.
Thank you, doctors.
So I have a question. So the options, the short-term planning on slide 10, it says, I think it's the one prior, let the lease expire or continue the lease until the winter break. So, I mean, to me, I almost see those as the same option, where, you know, we're planning for the start of the school year, but we have to make sure, like, because we've seen delays in our construction projects, and I'm so afraid of not having that building ready for our students that we would need to continue until the winter break. So to me, I feel like, are those two separate options the administration is talking about, or are they actually one?
Well, I can tell you that from meetings that I've been involved with Mr. Rogers, our CFO, that he is recommending that we continue the lease in case, or he is maybe not publicly recommended. He's just publicly recommended for that reason. And so I didn't mean to put on this slide that a fake option that it's always an option to let the lease expire at the end of this school year. But the safe option would be to continue the lease, and if we can move in August, great. If we can't, then we would make that transition from first semester to second semester in January.
Let me say this. You're right. Here's the juxtaposition we're up against. Nobody wants to be wrong on August 23rd, right? And no CFO wants to spend money. No CFO I've ever worked with wants to spend money unnecessarily. In this environment, hitting the August 23 date is the concern. So we've been trying to ring the number of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia to say, can we go month to month? Can we go to that point? The other issue that we're up against is having a school completed in September and having overcrowded other spaces. I would lose sleep at night. So I'm putting pressure on these guys. How can I have a building that's been renovated with open classroom space and an overcrowded school here and kids being bussed out? So we need to create a reality. To your point, after we hold this December meeting, what we're going to be doing, we've got to come out and make a decision. Sunset in June or month to month and extend the lease based on what it is, and we're trying to get that information back. So by the time we get to, if the board decides to do this and we get through a public hearing, we'll have a clearer picture on whether we have to go month to month, totally eliminate the lease, or go to winter break. But good point, David. Very good point.
Dr. Manfrey, if you could go to 7, the current elementary school catchments. I want to point out that COVID has interrupted and delayed a lot of plans and a lot of discussion. I think we would have been, if not for having to deal with the pandemic and remote learning and all the things we had to do there, we would have seen this map a lot. I don't think I've seen this map since before the pandemic started. So there's a lot of history here. And there's a lot of background information that people need to understand that's kind of going into our decision making. So I guess I want to refresh the public's memory and my memory, admittedly, as to why the Senkow and Kelly catchments are where they are, and where is Kelly on that map? Because I feel like it's maybe no, the school, the actual school.
So historically, Senkow students here would have attended Bywood Elementary School, and you were a part of that in Marshall Act at the time. Senkow students are part of that. So imagine Bywood Elementary School at one time, the same size building you have right now, had almost 900 students in one elementary school. Right? So hold on a second. Where Charles Kelly is, and Charles Kelly is here, those students all went to Stonehurst Hills. In the upper portion, Charles Kelly kids went to Highland Park. So Highland Park had an additional number of students from Charles Kelly, and Stonehurst had roughly 900 students. So Bywood Elementary School, my first year as a principal there was almost 800 kids. Before I got there, there were almost 1,000 students at Bywood Elementary School in Stonehurst Hills on less than 3 acres in a property. The thought process was, and I'm not going to get into the politics because sometimes we communicate things, it doesn't come across, I guess, what we mean it to, but I'll say this to everybody. There was a woman, I think she was here tonight, she's come to previous meetings, but she left earlier tonight, who keeps on reminding us of her history when her kids went here. For some reason, there was an availability to expand a school, Aronimink Elementary School, and historically that expansion didn't take place. Instead, what took place was, in my opinion, in predominantly non-English speaking communities, we're going to just bus those kids. We're going to bus them, right? And they were getting bused already to their school. So these students were bused to Bywood, Charles Kelly was bused to Highland Park. Those students were bused, so the attitude was, they're getting bused anyway, we can bus them somewhere else. In fact, at one point in time, PDE applauded what Upper Darby did because it was the least expensive thing to do. They leased 2 non-public parochial schools in the community, and here's where they were. Charles Kelly is in this area by Garriford Elementary School. So Charles Kelly students come down into the Garriford area. It's St. Charles Catholic School back in the day. It's now obviously Charles Kelly Elementary School. And Senkow students drive all the way past down into Glen Olden. It's not even on this map. Right? It's not even on this map. Below. Outside the community, because the theory was they're bused. Now, mind you, first before that, at Drexel Hill Middle School, Beverly Hills Middle School, Garriford Elementary School, Stonehurst Hills, Bywood Elementary School, and Highland Park, they put 25-year-old trailers. They were 25 years old at the time over 20 years ago. So now they're probably 50-year-old used modular trailers on these campuses as a stopgap. Drexel Hill is 10 or 11 on the back of the property that were meant to be temporary solutions. We've inherited these temporary solutions, and there's no development availability. So Aronimink is one of the very few places we can expand and grow within reason and get that building to a similar size as other elementary schools in the district, and that's the history of where we are. To your point, I know we race through these things sometimes. I remember being up during COVID on a virtual call with this map at a township council meeting till 1 in the morning, trying to get the township to understand what we are up against to get Aronimink approved during COVID. And I appreciate you saying that during COVID things were going on. We were trying to pull this off, borrow the money, and make these things happen, even during a pandemic, and that meeting went till 1 in the morning. We're all on it. And so just to pull these things off to get to where we are today, it's a compliment to this board and this district. But you're right, board member, Vice President Fields. It's a history lesson on what we're trying to accomplish. The right thing to do is find an area either in Marshall Road, 69th Street, or Cardington, and build a new elementary school there. Make improvements that will help the whole community, not just us, and make it fit so the kids can go to a walking neighborhood school. Right now, there's just some serious obstacles in variances and stormwater management to pull that off.
So you mentioned we're going to we're going to redistrict a little bit now, and then down the road again. But down the road is when we have a school built, or when?
Yes.
Okay. And we've had meetings where we're not sure when that's going to be. So
Sure.
why the hesitation? And I'm asking because I just wanted to explain to me. I know you have a good reason.
Sure.
So why the hesitation against redistricting now, like where kids that live close to Charles Kelly go to Charles Kelly, and it may be that the buildings where the kids live just aren't big enough. Have I got it?
So let me, if,
I've been at this for a while.
yeah,
So.
Dr. Manfred, you can go back to the map with the scatter plot of the students. This is the issue that we face in the school district. In the area where we can expand schools, we don't have large student populations. We have a declining student population, so to speak, or a very stagnant student population. So you can expand on Aronimink. Aronimink has fewer than 300 students, and their class sizes are among the smallest in the school district. Where when I was at Bywood, we had 28 kids in a class. Ed taught first grade there and fourth grade, over 28 kids in a class. Across the district, they were in the teens at Aronimink, right? That's a big problem, in my opinion. So the problem is you could put some classroom space on the Primus, but Primus doesn't really need general education classroom space. We have autistic support there, so you need to worry about that classroom space. But the populations you see in Primus, the green dots, are not a lot of kids there, right? Westbrook Park, it's holding just fine. We could put some addition and expansion on the Westbrook Park, a classroom or two, but they're not having major capacity issues. It's right around a little bit over 500 students or something in that building. It's a realistic elementary school size. Aronimink, which is one of the largest acreage in the entire school district, has 300 students or less on that property, and you could expand it. Hillcrest, Highland Park, you'll see even Hillcrest doesn't have as many students in its catchment area as Highland Park. So we need to counterclockwise redistrict students in order to make this work, to alleviate the overcrowding. So even when we put an elementary school in the 69th Street area, it still isn't going to solve the problem without the use of the kindergarten center and without expanding Aronimink, which we try to explain at that meeting at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
You still need an elementary school in the 69th Street area. You still have to move Highland Park kids to Hillcrest, Hillcrest kids eventually to Aronimink, so that you could ease the overcrowding, reverse districting, because there's not enough space in the area where we need it the most, and there's not enough space to build a school there right now to do it that way. So when Board President Brown was a parent volunteering his time on the education specifications, I was knighted, for lack of a better term, to take this project over, and I didn't want to take it over, but I was given this project. And at that time, we looked at the middle school and the elementary school, and the goal was to have redistricting one time. Because there's a saying in public education, superintendents get fired for two things. Not that they want kids to learn how to read, it's how they go about getting kids to learn how to read, and redistricting. Right. That gets superintendents fired. Right. So the game plan at that time was to redistrict one time. We're not going to be in a position now to do it, but at least it's a whole community of students in that school instead of some spot redistricting. We did look at a parent's suggestion from the Aronimink Home and School about can we fill it up all the way and move Highland Park kids in there. It's an option. The problem there is you're leaving the kindergarten center without they need classroom space too. And so we never thought that with the Aronimink piece, we were going to ease Highland Park's overcrowding. It's very important. It's a very important part. The original plan, we knew that the Aronimink addition was not the first step to alleviate the overcrowding at Highland Park. The Aronimink addition's sole purpose was to get Senkow students back into the district. Then we build a new elementary school. Then we do all the easing. I'm hearing from people that that wasn't the plan. If any document that you look at and every goal that we've talked out since that period of time, the number one goal that we were asked with is to get Senkow kids back the quickest way that we can.
And Dr. McGarry, I'll just say some of the awkwardness of the catchment areas in regards to option one, which isn't listed as a negative and perhaps it should have been, would be that literally students from the Hillcrest catchment area currently would be walking past Hillcrest Elementary School to get to Aronimink.
And that may happen still.
Yeah, and that could potentially happen, but when you redistrict counterclockwise,
If you go back, yeah.
there's going to be some awkwardness. I think Dr. McGarry wants to show it to you on the map.
eventually what Dr. Manfrey's saying, and these are public maps, when we get to the final redistricting, I think it was like scenario 32 or 33, we reviewed 33 elementary school scenarios with maps and 40 middle school scenarios. Eventually, Aronimic's catchment area expands almost to the bus front door at Hillcrest Elementary School. So those students who could probably walk closer to Hillcrest will have to go to Aronimic, and then Hillcrest will cross over into Highland Park to move Highland Park kids over to Hillcrest. Otherwise, there's no other way to do it. That's the reality of those maps that are there.
Right, right. There's a lot of choices. Not many of them are very good, is kind of what it sounds like.
No,
None of them are perfect. None of them are perfect.
No, and I respect the public, newer parents that come in are frustrated hearing information. And look, this is all frustrating. I would much rather be able to throw up brand new schools in a property and make everybody happy that way. But this is complicated stuff that we've inherited, a complex situation we have to solve. And it's going to take time.
So the Senkow community could be at Aronimic for a while, and when they get to middle school,
Yeah, so this
going
is
to Beverly
this is
Hills.
important.
yeah,
The Senkow students would still go to Beverly Hills Middle School. That's their neighborhood regardless. So even when they go back to their neighborhood when the new elementary school is built, they would end up going to Beverly Hills Middle School regardless at that point in time. To capitalize on one important piece, because Board Member Mitchell reached out to this and expressed this to me. Her concern is that this, and I'm sure it sounds like it's yours and others, that we're giving up on the concept of a new elementary school in the 69th Street area. We're not. In February, Tim, when the Ed Specs plan is updated and redone, right, we're going to be coming back to you and saying, guess what? We're going to have to go to either ourselves and roll the dice on the cost of Cardington, and it could be expensive, and figure it out. We might have to go to the township and say we want Marshall Road. How can we work that out? Or we want 69th Street, and even if 69th Street costs a boatload of money and redistributing water, and there's a Peregrine Falcon that's there and everything else, we're going to come to you and say, this is our best option that we're going to have to play out to get those kids back in that community. And that's a February decision that we don't want to make another decision without that full facility study giving us a projection of our students, reviewing our lifespan of our boilers, chillers, and our roofs, and looking at that. So in February, we're going to turn around to you and say, we're going after one of these sites to review it as a cost.
okay. It solves I think, the kindergarten problem, the need for space at the kindergarten center. It solves that. It brings the kids that have been bussed out of the community back home into the community.
There's one other final solution we threw out that we didn't add, we had like 20 of them. One of the things the CFO thought about too was the 1 through 5 scenario, moving Senkow there, Hillcrest kids, and alleviating some of the crowding in Highland Park. What you could do temporarily maybe is redistrict just that area. Senkow has to stay where it is though. You can't move Senkow, which we thought was a major no-no, right? You swing the kindergarten over, you move some Highland Park kids over to Hillcrest, some Hillcrest kids over temporarily, leave this kindergarten center open, renovate the kindergarten center next, so that when the kindergarten center kids go back in, you could put some additional space onto that. We thought, why would we spend that expense without a complete facility study done? Swing these kids over there, let's wait for the facility study to be done, right? That money that we're using for the Senkow lease can pay down the bond, part of the bond for the Aronimic project. Let's get a fuller picture of where we are and keep our eye on the prize on a new elementary school in the 69th Street area. We looked at, despite what you might hear from others, we have looked at internal redistricting short-term and long-term, and we provided some of that tonight.
I appreciate the work, and we've been talking about this for
Sure.
a long time, and I've had a lot of those conversations, and this is one of those rare things in Upper Darby School District where it's straightforward, it solves some of the problems in the district, and the rarest of things, it might be logistically easy, doesn't seem like the right word here, but not as difficult as other things and other options. So I appreciate everybody's work. I appreciate you taking the time to kind of go
Sure.
into the history. I think the history is important here.
Yeah.
And It is what it is.
And to be clear, whatever action the board takes of these scenarios and whatever happens by after tonight in the December meeting, there will be another public hearing on just Senkow Elementary School, which, to your point, Don Fields, Vice President Fields, thanks for letting me review it again, because I'm sure I'm going to have to go through all this history of things again. So
Yeah,
I
till 1 in
appreciate
the
that.
morning, yeah, okay. Yep.
All right, I just wanted to add two little small things. One of them is I just wanted to give props to the Aronimink School family. They have been definitely willing partners in helping the administration figure all this out, because there's a certain soft skills piece that needs to be, like Dr. McGarry and others have mentioned, that we need to keep in mind as we're trying to figure things out. And like I mentioned earlier in this meeting, I had just been to Senkow for my very first time. And in my conversations with a teacher, for example, whose main want of working here was because they heard of how strong our work ethic was that this person, don't want to identify them necessarily, is really looking forward to being able to teach their art class in an appropriate room where they have the space and don't have to split it with a library that basically is held in a room that's probably less than a third of this size. Not that they don't make every single best use of that space possible, not that they don't put on book fairs at the same time that they're trying to do kilns and structures and paintings and things like that. They make it work because they have to. And this teacher is really looking forward to brand new opportunities. And the other thing that I wanted to also mention is the fact that walking around that facility, I really feel that, and everyone I think would agree, that our students do deserve to, for example, in Senkow, they teach their music classes on half of a stage in a basement. And we're not talking necessarily like a full-size school basement. We're talking about, if you're familiar with fellowship halls and churches and how they sometimes double in the back as a fellowship kind of space. That's what they're doing down there. Not that they don't make it work, but they make it work because they have to. They deserve a whole lot more than what they are able to get in the capacity of that school in many different ways. And I think it's highly appropriate. I'm not partial to any school, but obviously I came from Aronimink. My mom loves the heck out of that school even now. And I think it's highly appropriate that that particular school is being tasked, if you will, with this kind of, I don't want to say it's like an insurmountable problem, but I just think it's very, very appropriate that Aronimink is being tasked with such a distinct thing in front of them, and I think that they're definitely up for it.
Yeah, and I just want to commend the staff and Principal Rehak and Principal Dr. Puglisi and their assistant principals who've already been working just in case we move in this direction to put a transition plan in place, and in particular the Aronimink staff and Principal Rehak with construction, still being able to educate the students of Aronimink. It's frankly not been easy all the time. You know, there's been times where Timmy Leaf has had to go over and stop the jackhammering. But I thought it was an appropriate time, Board Member Warsavage, to commend the staff and the principal of Aronimink Elementary School and the work that they're doing, despite the construction that's going on.
I think that was a wonderful way of wrapping up agenda item number 1. I believe we are ready for agenda item number 2.
Agenda item number 2 is the 2023-24 budget presentation regarding a preliminary budget versus an accelerated opt-out, which will require board action moving forward. So we'll go through this presentation. It's very much similar to the presentation given last month and also the one we give it just about this time every year to discuss what our options are to move forward through the budget process. So right now we'll go through and we'll review what we know at this time regarding the 2023-24 applicable Act 1 information, Upper Darby School District Act 1 historical data, and then we'll revisit the our timeline as it fits to our board meetings as presented at the previous committee meeting. So right now, just as we did last month, we know that here's the comparison of our base index to adjusted index. This current school year, the 22-23 school year, we had a base index of 3.4 and an adjusted index of 5. The 23-24 budget year, The base index for the Commonwealth is 4.1%, and Upper Darby School District's adjusted index is actually 6%. So that is the highest we could go without going for exceptions or referendum. This is just a look historically that we go through, and we usually go back. We like to show that 2016-17 school year because it's actually an indicator of, it was a year where the district went out with a 0% tax increase. And historically, when you go out with a tax increase like that, you have a tough time trying to make up for those budgets for many years to come. And you know, as you look as a comparison from 16-17 all the way up through this current school year, you'll see that we trend right around the base index, if not below. So you can kind of go left from right from that 0%. There was a jump. That was the highest tax increase in the past 7 years, 2.89. We're really looking at coming out of that 0%, and immediately that next year you're looking at trying to make up for that difference. And then again, it was at 2.5. We've been able to stabilize a little bit in those, you know, the past 5 years or so, 2.5, 1.9, 2.6 for 2 years straight. And then last year we were able to come in at a 1.01%.
I just want to remind everybody of something, too, that's really important. Those who've been here for a long period of time, Dr. Manfrey, me, Mr. Marshallak, Mrs. Simone, Dr. Council, and Dr. Kelly. We've had to make substantial changes here in the district because of taxes and budgeting. We've had to make cuts. We've changed we had to change the middle school schedule several times, which frustrated staff and frustrated a lot of people. We had to go away from teaming because we had to reduce staff. We had to change high school scheduling. So what the CFO is presenting, Craig Rogers is presenting here, is that on some level, a 0% increase or 0% tax does result in programmatic changes to get there. In public education, 75 to 80% of your budget is staffing and personnel. And the reality is, to make it work, something has to go. And historically, the educational side of this community has cut programming and people year after year after year to survive. Public scrutiny, public attacks on why we're doing it, but from 2007 and 8 through the middle point of this, there were substantial long-term programmatic changes that had to take place to keep the taxes low and try to keep things going. But the board historically had to make very tough decisions and live with that. And that's what you're seeing play out over time as well.
And absolutely accurate. And again, just to reiterate, this is just a representation of the percentage tax increase, not to Dr. McGarry's point of where were the expenses and how they fluctuated from year to year as well. So the yellow is actually what the district had approved over the past years for the tax increase, and you'll see all the way back to 2018-19, we have since then stayed at or below the base index, not going to that adjusted index, which is important for our next conversation and the recommendation we'll be making here in a couple minutes. And again, just to reiterate, this current year is 4.1% base index across the entire Commonwealth, and Upper Darby is allowed to go up to their adjusted index at 6% without asking for exception to that process. So on this next slide, we go through really, we're at a crossroads from a budgetary perspective in the process for the school district. We're going to ask the board to make a decision on either going down the path for a preliminary budget or go down the path of an opt-out resolution. The preliminary budget goes through, and the timeline's on the left-hand side of going through adopting a resolution to authorize the proposed preliminary budget. And you can read through the details here, but what's that really mean? If a board's in a situation where they do believe, and the business office believes that you're going to need to go above your adjusted index, and again, that's 6% going into this budget year. If you feel as though you're going to have to go down that path of going above the 6%, it behooves you to go down the preliminary budget path. It allows you to go for exceptions to the state for special ed, for retirement costs, and go above that percentage increase. In the opt-out resolution, you're committing as a district that for this budget process, you will not exceed your adjusted index. Again, 6%. And on that previous slide, you saw that we were well below that as we've been managing our budgets. So my recommendation, the administration recommendation to the board would be to go down the path of an opt-out and commit to the fact that we're not going to increase taxes above 6%. I'm confident that we can come in with a budget that's going to be below 6%. We'll go through, any challenges that we are presented with, because every year there are always unique challenges that, we've had to navigate, over the past 4 or 5 years specifically, pandemic, all kinds of different construction projects, and being, of the mindset that, Dr. McGarry had gone through those cuts all those years ago with much of the administration that's here. My goal has been to try and find a way to bring as much back as possible. So, as a board, you've approved many staffing additions for support services out of special ed pupil services, and from our teaching perspective, that's, although fantastic that we're adding them back, we're still nowhere near the levels that we were when, we were probably at our best educationally. So at 6%, I still believe that we will be able to bounce the budget well below that 6% increase. And for that reason, I would recommend the board move forward with the opt-out. Now, what does that actually mean for tonight's meeting, and what I'm going to ask to be moved forward is that, bless you, for the December board meeting on December 6th, we would bring forward an opt-out, or adopt an accelerated budget opt-out resolution, which would then just set us on our path for the timeline, which you can see on the right-hand side here. We'd come back for our first budget presentation, go down into the depths and all the details of the expenditures and revenues at the April committee meeting, where we would ask the board that following that meeting, the May 9th meeting, adopt a proposed final budget. We'd give 2 more public presentations in May and June. The June meeting would be immediately followed by a special voting meeting. So June 20th would be that presentation, and immediately following that, ask the board to adopt the final budget, which is the same process we've actually gone through for the past few years. So at this point, if the board has any questions, I'll field them.
At some point, Dr. McGarry, I would like to see those levels that Mr. Rogers talked about as far as when we were at our best, like when we had the reading specialists. I know what those cuts were when we had to make those hard choices, but I would love to see that and have it outlined, and the public can see where we were, what those optimal levels were, so that we can know what we're striving to get back to. So I would like to see that.
Yeah, I did go back and forth with Dr. Manfrey and pull up a presentation from at a public meeting many moons ago, but I have it at my fingertips, and I'll get it to you guys, and we'll do a public review of that.
Thank you. Sorry, Doctor.
We will now go for the time for public comment. If we have anyone interested physically here who would like to make comment, please come to the mic, announce your name, your address, and the agenda item that you will be making a comment on.
Edward Ganges, 1905 Green Hill Road, Lansdowne, PA, Upper Darby. So first I want to say, when you guys are doing a great job, you're doing a great job. When I don't agree that you're doing a great job, well, I share that too. So right now I'd like to share that you're doing a great job. This is for the agenda item regarding the management of the Senkow Elementary School and the returning of the children to the district. A couple of months ago, we had a situation where we needed to be re-educated on the goals and intent of this project. I just wanted to thank Dr. Manfrey for stepping up, working with Principal Puglisi at Senkow to address all of the concerns, put in some change management, and just educate us all over at the Senkow community, where I happen to be the treasurer of the Home and School Association, to put everybody's minds at ease and really share out what's going on. I think you guys did a fantastic job with that, and as it shows here, you put in a fantastic amount of planning. So I just want to say thank you for that, and you did a great job. I want to thank Dr. McGarry for taking the time to do the walkthrough and reflect some historical insight. I was also talking to the lady he was referring to, the white-haired lady named Susan, who lives in my neighborhood, regarding the history. The one thing that was overlooked, and I'd like to ask the school board to address, is adding additional levels to the existing elementary schools. A third story, maybe a third plus a fourth story, how that could work and if that's being considered. And if you could just share it back and let us know, that would also be greatly appreciated. Lastly, again, watching Dr. McGarry explain this and cover the amount of hard work you guys put into that. You put real hard work into that. And that's why we have confidence in you. Just asking that you, again, off topic, but I'm asking that you put that same amount of hard work into this security or metal detection systems moving forward, put in the same amount of committees, put the same amount of time in to see what the long-term impacts are, and do what is obviously your best work regarding that project, the same way you did for the Bringing Our Children Back Home project, and that would be greatly appreciated by the parents. So thank you. That's all I have to add.
We will have to explore creatively no matter what we do. In Upper Darby School District, there are some unique factors. One of the unique factors, seemingly only in the Aronimink community, is no front yard parking. In certain areas where it's rezoned, there are certain restrictions in comparison to others. So the reason why the addition is where it is at Aronimink is because we had to work very hard to figure out a way to make it happen against the obstacles about allowing front yard parking in that area. There are height variances. When we went after the Clifton Heights project, Clifton Heights, in my opinion, intentionally tried to change the zoning because they knew we were going to try to build a school there to make it so that it could only be about a 25 to 10-foot high building on the property to set the height restrictions. There is currently, I think it's a 35 to 55 foot. There's a height variance in Upper Darby Township. I don't think Upper Darby Township is against a height variance because I think what they realize, no matter what, that we'd have to go to them to ask for is building up, even though it's not the best environmentally and use of like HVAC and ventilation, building up might be our only solution, is to build a taller building in a different postage stamp that we have. The issues that we have from a zoning standpoint in Upper Darby would be you have to have 3 parking spaces per classroom currently in the township ordinance. That's a problem because we can't even park in most of our neighborhoods right now with parking spaces. So the school district putting 3 parking spaces per classroom, that's a problem. We need to review that. We've talked about doing underground parking. We've talked about rooftop play areas that you see in some areas. So these are all on the table and looking at those options there. I'm going to come back to this because in my position, I can't do anything other than keep extending the olive branch and trying to make things work because that's my job. I'm going to rephrase this again one more time. We are going to formulate committees. We're going to meet with people, and we're going to talk about after-school opportunities. What do weapon detection systems look like? We're going to talk about it all with communities and kids, and if the businesses want to be a part of it, great. We're going to have those conversations. I am not, nor is this board, unless there's something happened that I'm not aware of, and maybe they are. I'm just kidding. We're not going to go out there and ram anybody's throat without a conversation and a process and reviewing it with people, taking a look at the pros and cons. I've got tons of research on weapons detection systems and metal detectors. Are they end-all, be-all or not? I'm going to share that with people. We're going to work through it. We're going to have kids involved in this process. I've got a Google Doc where I'm working with high school kids on ideas that they have. I share with the business district. We've got to step up and invest in after-school opportunities. We can't just put a substation in, and I shared this with you, Mr. Ganges, and just arrest kids because they're kids, and that system isn't going to work. What we need all to understand is we're all in this together. We got to be patient with each other, and we're going to process through it, and we're going to get there. And along the way, we're going to have disagreements, right? We're going to have those disagreements. The bottom line is the number one objective is to keep people safe and their emotional well-being, and that's all we're going to do, and that's how we're going to process through it. Nobody is going to say we're doing this in a backroom deal without a public discussion about it. I can promise you that. We're going to have committees. They're going to work our way through it.
Thank you.
Any other public comment for people physically present? Dr. McGarry? Virtual comment?
It's from Megan Rubino, 912 Alexander Avenue, Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Received 1122 today during the other meeting. Finance and Operations Agenda Item Number 1. The comment reads as follows. I would like to say that I'm thankful to the Upper Darby School Board for doing their due diligence in approaching the closure and relocation of a school community prior to and during this meeting. It is important that school board meetings are used by duly elected officials to hold parties accountable to the health, safety, and educational welfare of our children across the district. At the October 22 Finance and Operations meeting, I requested an opportunity to meet with the Senkow Home and School Association and with the Upper Darby School District Administration to discuss what they would like to see occur as the process moved forward and how the Aronimink Elementary Home and School Association could develop help to facilitate any of their requests in what was, even then, looking like a foregone decision to close Senkow and merge with Aronimink. Logistics are essential to consider when proposing a move such as this one. The closure of an entire school community and the seamless merger of all learners into a building that will be more than double the size each school was previously used to requires much planning and attention to detail. In response, I was invited to a meeting with the Commonwealth politicians, many UDSD administrators, and only one other Home and School Association parent, Miss Cynthia Isles, not of Senkow Elementary School. At this meeting, the same presentation was given as the October committee meeting. There was no attempt to discuss how to merge the school communities or what would be needed by the communities to successfully help each other maneuver the transition. I was left feeling as though there was no plan to address the needs of students and parents in Senkow and Aronimink, and further, no plan to alleviate the chronic overcrowding at Highland Park Elementary School, a sentiment Ms. Isles readily seconded in her capacity as parent and HSA president there. My repeated request to examine a redistricting of elementary school catchments was, again, not seriously entertained with any presentation of data or plan to collect such data. As I previously stated, logistical planning is essential in order to make a transition, such as the one being acted on here tonight, successful. I am aware that the school board is up against a November 22 deadline for closing Senkow Elementary School. I'm also aware, the rest of the information, is that for me? No. Okay. Sorry. I'm also aware that the board, the board action would be to merge school communities partway through the academic year. The items within the new building will include new desks, new chairs, and new interactive boards to facilitate a transition at any time. However, a plan for the students themselves to be moved into new classrooms and perhaps new classmates and/or new teachers over a weekend seems to be the missing logistical piece. I am upset and concerned that the lack of appropriate planning at this juncture will result in a less than smooth transition for all of the children and teachers and families involved in creating a new school community. I'm happy that the Upper Darby School Board is going to be able to cross one item off its long-term planning to-do list. I'm excited to help create a new community in a building at Aronimink Elementary School. I hope the school board considers the need of rigorous logistical planning leading up to the implementation of any board action, whether that is in the form of a new short-term position to facilitate that process or another personnel decision that alleviates the stress of planning for a merging of schools during an academic year. I hope that it is considered and acted upon accordingly. Thank you for your time and consideration. End of comment.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rogers, would you mind going over the agenda items one more time for us, please?
Sure. So again, we had two agenda items tonight. The first was short-term planning for Aronimink and Senkow Elementary Schools. Dr. Manfrey and Dr. McGarry reviewed our short-term plans for the Aronimink and Senkow Elementary Schools. The presentation reviewed planning goals, space considerations, catchment areas, long-term planning, short-term planning, and also a historical review of how we are where we are. The administration provided the board with our recommendation, and at this time are asking how the board would like to move forward for the December meeting.
All right, and do we have a consensus to move it forward for consideration at the next board meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, Director Desnoyers.
Do we have to make a distinction between when we end the lease?
Mr. Rogers or Dr. McGarry, would you like to clarify that for us, please?
Decision?
Tonight, there was a presentation talking about the merging of the schools and the timeline of that and the potential discussion of the Senkow lease. At this point in time, we have the opportunity to wait until February to make the decision on the Senkow lease. Our first business would be, following tonight, if you agree to consensus to move this forward, there will be a resolution at the December meeting. That resolution at the December meeting would be to call for a public hearing to hear public comments on the I'm going to use this, I'm working with Damien on this, the sunsetting of the school at Senkow Elementary School, and to allow the public more time to have feedback on that. Following that, we'll have another discussion on the leasing of Senkow Elementary School.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, and we would have to work together, the two of us, on policy 206.
All right, I think there's a consensus to move that forward to the next board meeting. Agenda item number 2.
And the second agenda item was the 2023-24 budget for the options of a preliminary budget versus an accelerated opt-out. Again, board action. We provided, or we discussed the Act 1 timeline as it relates to both the preliminary budget and the accelerated opt-out. We've reviewed historical data as it relates to Act 1. And we also provided information, and we'll ask the board to move forward. As I stated before, our recommendation is to move forward with the opt-out resolution, and would ask that the board support that.
And is there a consensus for that?
Yes. Yes.
Wonderful. And I turn this meeting back over to President Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for a great presentation tonight, and thank you, Director Ward Savage, for facilitating the Finance and Operations meeting. A motion is in order for the adjournment of the Finance and Operations Committee meeting.
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.